The shuttle doors opened with a soft hiss, and Ambassador Daniel Harris stepped onto the crystalline floor of the Galactic Council Station. He was a man in his late 50s, with gray hair at his temples and kind eyes that seemed to hold the weight of many years. The United Earth Federation had chosen him to represent all of humanity in these important negotiations. His mission was simple, but vital. He needed to secure humanity's place among the stars. Daniel took a deep breath and looked around the massive docking bay. Everything here was designed to impress and intimidate visitors. The walls stretched upward for hundreds of feet and were made of some material that shifted colors like oil on water. Strange ships of alien design sat in neat rows, and creatures of every shape and size moved about their business. Some walked on two legs like humans, while others crawled or floated or moved in ways that Daniel could not even describe. His aide Claire Bennett walked beside him, carrying several data tablets pressed against her chest. She was a young woman in her early 30s with sharp, intelligent eyes and brown hair pulled back in a practical style. This was her first assignment outside the Sol system, and Daniel could see the mixture of excitement and nervousness on her face. "The architecture is incredible," Claire whispered as they walked toward the main corridor. "I've never seen anything like it." Daniel nodded slowly. The Council Station has existed for over 10,000 years. 12 species built it together as a symbol of galactic unity. Of course, that unity has always been selective about who gets included. They passed through security checkpoints, where alien guards scanned them with devices that hummed and beeped in strange patterns. The guards were Vorthani, a species that resembled giant praying mantises with beautiful iridescent wings. They looked at the two humans with obvious contempt but said nothing as they waved them through. The walk to the council chamber took nearly 30 minutes. Daniel used this time to review everything he knew about the species he would be facing. The Galactic Council consisted of 12 member races, each with their own agendas and prejudices. Some were ancient beyond measure, while others had only joined in the last few centuries. None of them were particularly happy about humanity's rapid expansion across the stars. In just 60 years, humans had gone from a single planet to 12 thriving colonies. They had developed faster than light travel independently and had begun exploring regions of space that older species considered their territory. This made the established powers nervous. A nervous galaxy was a dangerous galaxy. "Ambassador Harris," Claire said quietly, "I have been reviewing the Council records. In the last 500 years, they have only accepted 2 new species into full membership. Both times, the process took over a century of negotiations." "I am aware," Daniel replied. "But humanity does not have a century. Our colonies need trade routes and protection. If we cannot secure those through diplomacy, then some of our more aggressive politicians will push for military solutions. I am here to make sure that does not happen." They reached the entrance to the council chamber, and Daniel paused for a moment. The doors were massive, carved from some kind of dark stone and covered in symbols representing each member's species. There was no symbol for humanity. "Not yet, Claire," Daniel said softly. "Whatever happens in there, I want you to remain calm. These beings will try to provoke us. They will insult us and dismiss us and treat us like animals begging for scraps. You must not react. Do you understand?" Claire straightened her spine and nodded. "I understand, Ambassador." Good Daniel smiled gently. "And please call me Daniel when we are alone. Ambassador makes me feel old." The doors swung open, and they walked into the council chamber. It was a circular room with seats, arranged in rising tiers around a central speaking platform. Each of the 12 species had their own section decorated in their particular style. The Vorthani section was all sharp angles and reflective surfaces. The collective section pulsed with soft bioluminescent light. The Dominion section was carved from black volcanic rock and radiated heat. At the highest point sat High Counselor Vexther, a towering reptilian creature with 4 arms and scales that shifted from green to gold as he moved. His eyes were yellow with vertical slits, and they fixed on Daniel with cold calculation. "The human delegation may approach," Vexther announced. His voice booming through the chamber, Daniel walked to the speaking platform while Claire took a seat in the small area designated for petitioning species. It was the lowest point in the room, designed to make visitors feel small and insignificant. Daniel did not let it bother him. He had faced far worse things than alien architecture. "Hi, Counselor," Daniel began with a respectful bow. "Bring greetings from the United Earth Federation and from all of humanity. We come seeking peaceful cooperation with the great species of this council." A sound that might have been laughter rippled through the chamber. The Vorsani delegate clicked its mandibles together in amusement. The mammals come begging for scraps at the table of their betters. Daniel ignored the insult and continued. "Humanity wishes to establish formal trade agreements, secure mining rights in the Outer Rim territories, and open communication channels with our neighboring species. We believe such arrangements would benefit all parties involved." High Counselor Vexter leaned forward in his seat. "And what exactly does humanity offer in return for these privileges? Your species is young. Your technology is primitive compared to ours. Your military is insignificant. What value do you bring to this council?" It was a fair question, even if it was asked with contempt. Daniel had prepared for it. "We offer our adaptability," Daniel said calmly. "Humanity has survived ice ages and plagues and wars that nearly destroyed us. We have learned to thrive in every environment our world offered, from frozen wastelands to burning deserts. We learn quickly, and we never give up. These traits have value." "Pretty words," rumbled Ambassador Crixel of the Dominion. He was massive, nearly 8 feet tall, with skin like cooled lava and eyes that burned with inner fire. "But the galaxy does not run on pretty words. It runs on power, and humans have no power." Daniel met the warrior's burning gaze without flinching. There was a time when he would have seen Crixel as a threat to be eliminated. There was a time when he would have already identified 17 different ways to kill the massive creature before it could take a single step. But that was long ago. That was a different man, or so he kept telling himself. "Power takes many forms, Ambassador Crixel," Daniel replied evenly. "Not all of them are obvious." Something flickered in those burning eyes. Curiosity, perhaps? Or maybe just irritation at a prey animal that did not know its place. "Hi, Counselor." Vexter waved one of his forehands dismissively. "We will consider your petition, Ambassador Harris. These proceedings are adjourned until tomorrow." Daniel bowed again and returned to Claire. As they walked out of the chamber, he could feel dozens of alien eyes on his back. Most held contempt. Some held curiosity. A few held something that might have been concern. Good, Daniel thought. Let them wonder. Let them look at this gray-haired diplomat and see only what he wanted them to see. The negotiations would be difficult, but not impossible. Humanity would find its place among the stars through patience and persistence. He had buried the other way. He had buried it deep and hoped it would never need to be unearthed. But somewhere in the back of his mind, in the dark place where the Silent Reaper still lived, Daniel Harris was already memorizing the layout of the station and cataloging potential weaknesses in alien security just in case. 3 days had passed since the negotiations began, and nothing had gone well. Every proposal Daniel presented was met with dismissal or mockery. The Council denied humanity's request for trade routes. They denied the mining rights. They even refused to establish basic communication protocols that would allow human ships to safely travel through neighboring territories. Daniel sat in the small quarters, assigned to the human delegation, and reviewed his notes. The room was bare and uncomfortable, clearly designed to remind visitors of their low status. The bed was too short, and the lighting was harsh on human eyes. Small insults meant to wear down their spirits. Claire entered, carrying 2 cups of something that was supposed to be coffee, but tasted like burnt rubber. She handed one to Daniel and sat down across from him. "The Vorthani delegate laughed at our agricultural proposal," she said with frustration in her voice. "He said humans breed like insects and should be contained before we infest the galaxy." Daniel took a sip of the terrible coffee and nodded slowly. "They're afraid of us, Claire. Not of what we are now, but of what we might become. A species that grows as fast as ours is unpredictable. Unpredictable things make old empires nervous. So what do? Accept their insults and go home with nothing. We keep trying." Diplomacy is not about winning every battle. It is about finding the small openings where agreement is possible. Daniel set down his cup and looked at his young aide with gentle eyes. I have spent 30 years doing this work. I have negotiated with terrorists and dictators and beings who wanted nothing more than to see me dead. The council is difficult but not impossible. Claire shook her head. You have more patience than I do, Ambassador. Daniel, he reminded her with a small smile. He walked to his quarters and locked the door behind him. For several minutes, he simply stood in the center of the small room, breathing slowly and steadily. He was preparing himself, waking up parts of his mind that had been asleep for 30 years. Then he began his work. He accessed files in the shuttle's computer that officially did not exist, files that were encrypted with codes known only to a handful of people in the entire Federation. These files contained detailed information about the Council Station, its layout, its security systems, its weaknesses. The Federation had always known that diplomacy might fail. It always prepared for the possibility that humanity would need to send a different kind of message. Daniel retrieved equipment from hidden compartments in the shuttle's walls, compartments that did not appear on any official schematic. Inside, he found things he had not touched in 3 decades. A black bodysuit made of material that absorbed light and heat signatures. Gloves with microscopic grips that could cling to any surface. Small devices designed for very specific purposes. He laid everything out on his bed and looked at it for a long moment. These were the tools of the Silent Reaper. The tools of a man who had killed more enemies than he could count. It's a man who had ended wars by ending the people who started them. Daniel had buried that man. He had walked away from the darkness and tried to build something better. He had married and raised children and dedicated his life to proving that humanity could achieve its goals without violence. But some things could not be forgiven. Some insults required an answer that words could never provide. He sent a single, encrypted message to Earth. Just 3 words that would activate protocols known only to the highest levels of government. Protocol 17, active, when the Federation received this message, they would know exactly what was happening. They would know that Ambassador Daniel Harris had become the Silent Reaper once again. Then he began to change. He removed his diplomatic robes and put on the black bodysuit. It fit perfectly despite the years. He attached the equipment to his belt and checked each item carefully. He ran through the station blueprints in his mind, memorizing every corridor and ventilation shaft and security checkpoint. The station's night cycle began, and the lights in the corridors dimmed to simulate darkness. Most species on the station were diurnal and would be sleeping now. This was the time when predators hunted. Daniel looked at himself in the mirror. The kind old diplomat was gone. In his place stood something else entirely, something patient, something lethal, something that had been sleeping for 30 years and was now very much awake. He did not use the door when he left his quarters. The ventilation system of the council station was designed for environmental control. The architects had never imagined that anyone would use it for infiltration. Passages were narrow and filled with temperature extremes that would kill most species. Automated maintenance drones patrolled regularly to repair any damage. None of this stopped. Daniel, he moved through the vents like smoke, his body remembering skills that should have faded with age. He bypassed the drones with ease and navigated the narrow passages as if he had been born in them. The heat and cold meant nothing to him. His pain was just information to be processed and ignored. He had a list of 12 names in his mind. 12 council members who had watched Claire be brutalized and done nothing. 12 beings who had laughed at human suffering and called it justice. But he would start with one, Ambassador Crixel of the Dominion. The warrior who had dared to touch what belonged to humanity. The fool who thought that strength was measured only in size and muscle. Daniel moved silently through the darkness toward the diplomatic quarters. His breathing was slow and steady. His heart rate was perfectly controlled. His mind was empty of everything except the mission. The Silent Reaper had returned, and the galaxy was about to learn. Why humanity should never be underestimated, the human shuttle remained docked at the station. 12 hours had passed since the incident in the council chamber, and the delegation had not yet departed. The station authorities did not care. They assumed the humans were simply licking their wounds and preparing for the long journey home in shame. They were wrong. Daniel sat in the medical bay of the shuttle watching Dr. Samuel Torres work on Claire. The young woman lay unconscious on the examination table with sensors attached to her body monitoring her vital signs. Her face was pale and bruised, and her breathing was shallow but steady. 3 cracked ribs, Dr. Torres reported as he studied the scanner readings. A moderate concussion. Multiple contusions across her back and shoulders. She was lucky, Daniel. If she had hit that wall at a slightly different angle, her spine could have been shattered. Daniel said nothing, simply sat there, staring at Claire's bruised face, with an expression that Dr. Torres had never seen before. It was not anger. It was something colder than anger, something more controlled. She will recover, Dr. Torres continued. She needs rest and proper medical care, but she will be fine. We should leave immediately and get her to a real hospital back on Earth. Not yet, Daniel said quietly. Dr. Torres frowned. Daniel, what are you talking about? We need to go. The council made their position clear. Staying here only puts us in more danger. Daniel finally looked up at the doctor. They had known each other for 15 years. Dr. Torres had served as the medical officer on dozens of diplomatic missions. He had seen Daniel negotiate with warlords and criminals and hostile alien species. He had always admired the ambassador's calm and patient approach to even the most difficult situations. But the man looking at him now was not the calm diplomat he knew. There was something different in those kind eyes. Something that made Dr. Torres take an involuntary step backward. Sam, Daniel said softly, do you know why the Federation chose me for this mission? Because you were the best diplomat we have. Daniel smiled, but there was no warmth in it. No, they chose me because they knew something like this might happen. They chose me because of what I used to be, before the first became a diplomat, before I learned to believe in peaceful solutions. Dr. Torres had heard rumors, of course. Everyone in the diplomatic service had heard whispers about Ambassador Harris and his past. Stories about the Soul Wars and a man they called the Silent Reaper. But looking at this gentle gray-haired grandfather, it had always seemed impossible. Just stories told to make a boring diplomat seem more interesting. Now Dr. Torres was not so sure. What are you going to do? He asked carefully. Daniel stood and walked to the small viewport that looked out at the station. Millions of lights twinkled in the darkness. Millions of beings going about their lives with no idea what was about to happen. I am going to do something I promised myself I would never do again, Daniel said. But they hurt one of my people, Sam. They hurt her to humiliate us, to show the galaxy that humans are weak and worthless. I cannot let that stand. In this galaxy, there must be consequences for such actions. Daniel, think about this. You are one man against an entire station, against 12 species. This is suicide. Daniel turned, and there was something like amusement in his eyes. One man is all I have ever needed, Sam. One man moving silently through the darkness. One man who knows exactly where to strike and when. The Council believes humans are prey animals. Tonight, I'm going to teach them what happens when prey animals are pushed too far. He walked to his quarters and locked the door behind him. For several minutes, he simply stood in the center of the small room, breathing slowly and steadily. He was preparing himself, waking up parts of his mind that had been asleep for 30 years. Then he began his work. He accessed files in the shuttle's computer that officially did not exist. Files that were encrypted with codes known only to a handful of people in the entire Federation. These files contained detailed information about the Council Station, its layout, its security systems, its weaknesses. The Federation had always known that diplomacy might fail. They had always prepared for the possibility that humanity would need to send a different kind of message. Daniel retrieved equipment from hidden compartments in the shuttle's walls, compartments that did not appear on any official schematic. Inside, he found things he had not touched in 3 decades. A black bodysuit made of material that absorbed light and heat signatures. Gloves with microscopic grips that could cling to any surface. Small devices designed for very specific purposes. He laid everything out on his bed and looked at it for a long moment. These were the tools of the Silent Reaper. The tools of a man who had killed more enemies than he could count. A man who had ended wars by ending the people who started them. Daniel had buried that man. He had walked away from the darkness and tried to build something better. He had married and raised children, and dedicated his life to proving that humanity could achieve its goals without violence. But some things could not be forgiven. Some insults required an answer that words could never provide. He sent a single, encrypted message to Earth. Just 3 words that would activate protocols known only to the highest levels of government. Protocol 17, active, when the Federation received this message, they would know exactly what was happening. They would know that Ambassador Daniel Harris had become the Silent Reaper once again. Then he began to change. He removed his diplomatic robes and put on the black bodysuit. It fit perfectly despite the years. He attached the equipment to his belt and checked each item carefully. He ran through the station blueprints, in his mind memorizing every corridor and ventilation, shaft and security checkpoint. The station's night cycle began and the lights in the corridors dimmed to simulate darkness. Most species on the station were diurnal and would be sleeping now. This was the time when predators hunted. Daniel looked at himself in the mirror. The kind old diplomat was gone. In his place stood something else entirely. Something patient. Something lethal. Something that had been sleeping for 30 years and was now very much awake. He did not use the door when he left his quarters. The ventilation system of the council station was designed for environmental control. The architects had never imagined that anyone would use it for infiltration. The passages were narrow and filled with temperature extremes that would kill most species. Automated maintenance drones patrolled regularly to repair any damage. None of this stopped Daniel. He moved through the vents like smoke, his body remembering skills that should have faded with age. He bypassed the drones with ease and navigated the narrow passages as if he had been born in them. The heat and cold meant nothing to him. Pain was just information to be processed and ignored. He had a list of 12 names in his mind. 12 council members who had watched Claire be brutalized and done nothing. 12 beings who had laughed at human suffering and called it justice. But he would start with one, Ambassador Crixel of the Dominion. The warrior who had dared to touch what belonged to humanity. The fool who thought that strength was measured only in size and muscle. Daniel moved silently through the darkness toward the diplomatic quarters. His breathing was slow and steady. His heart rate was perfectly controlled. His mind was empty of everything except the mission. The Silent Reaper returned, and the galaxy was about to learn why humanity should never be underestimated. Ambassador Crixel woke to silence. This was wrong. His species required constant low-frequency vibrations to sleep properly. The environmental systems in his quarters were programmed to provide these vibrations at all times. But now there was nothing. Just absolute suffocating silence that pressed against his ears like a weight. He opened his eyes and scanned the darkness. His species could see heat signatures, and the room should have been filled with the warm glow of various systems and devices. But everything was cold. Everything was dark, as if the room itself had died. Crixel sat up slowly and reached for the weapon he kept beside his bed. His fingers found empty space. The weapon was gone. You know what humans fear most, Ambassador? The voice came from somewhere in the darkness. It was soft and calm and utterly without emotion. Crixel lunged toward the sound with his massive arms swinging through the air. His fist connected with nothing. We fear the dark. The voice continued from the other side of the room now. We fear the unknown. The things we cannot see. The monsters that might be hiding just beyond the edge of our vision. Crixel roared and charged toward this new direction. His claws tore through furniture and decorations as he smashed everything in his path. But again, he found nothing. The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. So we learned something important, the voice said from behind him now. We learned to become what we feared. We learned to be the darkness itself. Crixel spun around but saw only shadows. His hearts were beating fast now, pumping hot blood through his body. This was wrong. This was impossible. He was the greatest warrior of the Dominion. He had killed thousands of enemies in battle. He did not feel fear, and yet something cold was creeping through his chest. Something he had never experienced before. "What are you?" he demanded. His voice echoed in the empty room. I am what humanity becomes when you threaten our children, the voice replied. It was closer now, much closer. I am the reason our species survived on a world that tried to kill us every single day. I am the nightmare that your ancestors were wise enough to forget. Something touched Crixel's spine, just a gentle tap between his armored plates. He spun with all his speed, but again found nothing. Then for just a fraction of a second, he saw the human. Daniel Harris stood less than an arm's length away. He was dressed entirely in black, and his gray hair seemed to blend with the shadows around him. His kind eyes were gone. In their place were 2 points of cold light that held no mercy and no doubt. He looked at Crixel the way a scientist might look at an insect pinned to a board. Then he was gone again, melted into the darkness as if he had never existed. How are you doing this? Crixel demanded. His voice cracked slightly, and he hated himself for showing weakness. You are human. You are prey. You cannot do this. That is your mistake, Ambassador. The voice came from directly behind him now. You looked at humanity and saw only what you wanted to see. Soft bodies, short lives, fragile bones. You never asked yourself how such fragile creatures could conquer their world. You never wondered what kind of predator evolves on a planet where everything is trying to kill it. Something pressed against Crixel's throat, cold and sharp and perfectly positioned between his armored plates. He froze completely. He had not even seen the human move. I could kill you now, Daniel whispered. His breath was warm against Crixel's ear. It would be easy. Your species has 2 hearts, both accessible through the gap in your neck plates. I could stop them both before you finished your next breath. You would be dead before your body hit the floor. Crixel tried to move, but found he could not. His muscles refused to obey him. Was this some human trick? Some technology he did not understand? Or was it simply fear paralyzing him for the first time in his long, violent life? Your people believe themselves to be the greatest warriors in the galaxy, Daniel continued in that soft, terrible voice. You believe that strength is measured in size and muscle and the ability to crush your enemies with raw force. But that is not strength, Ambassador. That is just noise. The pressure on Crixel's throat increased slightly. A thin line of hot blood trickled down his neck. True strength is silence. True strength is patience. True strength is being able to kill your enemy in 100 different ways while they still think they are safe. Daniel paused, and Crixel could feel him smile in the darkness. I have been standing in your room for 3 hours, Ambassador. I watched you sleep. I listened to you breathe. I could have killed you at any moment. But I waited because I wanted you to understand something. Crixel managed to whisper. That you were never the predator in this room. You were never the hunter. From the moment you touched my aid, you became prey. A prey. And the only reason you are still alive is because I choose to let you live. The pressure disappeared suddenly. When Crixel's eyes adjusted, he saw the human standing by the door. Fully visible now, with his hands clasped behind his back, he looked like a teacher waiting for a slow student to understand a simple lesson. I am not going to kill you tonight, Ambassador, Daniel said calmly. Instead, you are going to deliver a message to the Council. Crixel found his voice again. What message? Tell them what happened here. Tell them that humanity came in peace, and peace was rejected. Tell them that we offered friendship and received violence in return. Daniel's voice hardened slightly. And tell them that the next time any of them touches one of my people, I will not be so merciful. I will return to this station, not as a diplomat, not as a soldier, but as the last thing they will ever see. He opened the door and stepped into the corridor. The light from outside illuminated his face for a moment, and Crixel saw both men who lived inside this human. The gentle diplomat who wanted nothing more than peace, and the silent reaper who could make an empire tremble with fear. The galaxy is vast, Ambassador, Daniel said softly. There is room for all of us. But if you force humanity to fight for our survival, we will do so. And we will win. Not because we are stronger or smarter or more advanced, but because we never give up. We never surrender. And we never forget those who harm our people. He walked away down the corridor. His footsteps made no sound on the metal floor. Crixel stood alone in his ruined quarters. His legs were shaking. His hearts were racing. And for the first time in his existence, he understood what it meant to be prey. When the medical team examined him an hour later, found a small device attached to his secondary heart. A device that could have stopped that heart. At any moment, with a single remote signal, the human had left it as a reminder, and Crixel knew with terrible certainty that he would never feel safe. Again, the emergency council session was called 3 hours after Ambassador Crixel stumbled into the medical bay. His screams had woken half the diplomatic level. The greatest warrior of the Dominion had been reduced to a shaking, terrified creature who could barely speak. Now the 12 species sat in the council chamber, but the atmosphere was entirely different from before. There was no laughter. There was no mockery. There was only fear. Crixel had told them what happened. At first, they had not believed him. The Dominion did not show fear. The Dominion did not admit to being bested in combat by anyone, especially not by a soft, fleshy human diplomat. But the look in his burning eyes convinced them. That, and the small device the medical team had removed from his secondary heart. "Hi," Counselor Vexler examined the device with trembling hands. It was no larger than a grain of rice, but the technology inside was beyond anything his species had ever seen. A perfect killing machine that could have ended Crixel's life at any moment. "This is impossible," Vexler said quietly. "Our security systems are the most advanced in the galaxy. No one could have infiltrated this station without detection. No one could have entered a secure diplomatic quarters without triggering 1,000 alarms. And yet he did," said Ambassador Drexel of the Collective. Their multiple voices harmonized into one calm tone. "The human moved through our station like a ghost. He bypassed every system we have. He stood in the room of our mightiest warrior for 3 hours without being detected." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Then Ambassador Vex Mora of the crystalline hegemony spoke. Her body was made of living crystal that chimed softly as she moved. "I must inform the council of something. When I returned to my quarters this morning, I found one of these devices attached to my primary neural cluster." A ripple of shock passed through the chamber. "As did I," said Ambassador Vex of the Vorthani swarm. His mandibles clicked nervously. "The device was placed inside my sleep pod. I do not know how this is possible. My pod was sealed and guarded." One by one, the other council members made similar confessions. 11 of the 12 had found devices attached to their bodies in their most secure locations. The human had visited every single one of them during the night. He had stood over them while they slept. He had touched them, and marked them, and left his calling cards. And none of them had known until morning. High Counselor Vexler's scales had gone pale. What manner of creature is this human? What kind of species produces beings capable of such things? "A survivor species," Ambassador Drexel replied thoughtfully. "We have made a grave error in judgment, High Counselor. We assumed that because humanity was young, they must also be weak. We forgot the most basic rule of evolution. The young must be the most dangerous of all. They must fight to survive, to grow, to claim their place in the universe. We have now seen what a single human can do when provoked. Imagine what billions of them could accomplish if we pushed them to war." Vexler slammed his fist against his seat. "Then we must destroy them now before they grow stronger. We must assemble a fleet and burn their worlds to ash." "And who will lead this fleet?" Drexel asked calmly. "Who among us will volunteer to face a species that can turn a single diplomat into a weapon of mass terror? Who will sleep peacefully, knowing that humans might be standing in the shadows of their bedroom waiting to strike?" No one answered. The silence stretched on and on. Finally, Ambassador Crixel spoke. His voice was hoarse and broken, nothing like the booming thunder of before. "I have fought in 100 wars. I have killed enemies beyond counting. I have never known fear until last night. The human could have killed me at any moment, but he chose not to. He chose mercy. We should not test what happens when he chooses differently." Vexler stared at the Dominion warrior in disbelief. "You suggest we surrender to these mammals? You suggest we give them everything they asked for, simply because one man frightened you?" I suggest we recognize reality, Crixel replied. We poked a creature we did not understand, and it showed us its teeth. We should be grateful it did not bite. The debate continued for hours, but the outcome was never really in doubt. Fear had done what diplomacy could not. The council that had laughed at humanity 3 days ago now spoke of them in whispers. Ambassador Drexel made the formal proposal. I move that we accept humanity's original petition. All of it. Trade routes, mining rights, communication protocols. They paused and let their multiple voices carry weight. And I further move that we extend a formal apology for the treatment of their diplomatic delegation. The vote was unanimous. 3 days later, Ambassador Daniel Harris returned to the council chamber. He had changed back into his diplomatic robes, and his kind eyes had returned to their usual gentle warmth. Claire walked beside him with her ribs still bandaged beneath her uniform. She held her head high despite the pain. The council members watched them approach with a new emotion in their eyes. It was not hatred. It was not contempt. It was respect. The deepest and most honest kind of respect that can only come from fear. Ambassador Harris, High Counselor Vexther, said carefully, the Galactic Council is to extend its sincere apologies for the unfortunate incident that occurred during your previous visit. We hope that relations between humanity and the Council can proceed on a more productive path. Daniel smiled his gentle smile. Of course, High Counselor, humanity has always sought peaceful coexistence with our galactic neighbors. We are a reasonable species. We do not hold grudges, and we do not seek revenge. All we have ever wanted is a fair chance to prove our worth. He took his seat in the chamber, not at the far end where Petitioner sat, but in a position of honor among the established powers, a seat that had been hastily prepared just for him. Ambassador Crixel could not meet his eyes. Later, as the shuttle departed, the station Claire finally asked the question that had been burning in her mind since she woke in the medical bay. Would you really have done it, Daniel? Killed them all? Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Outside the viewport, the stars stretched into infinity. Countless worlds. Countless species. Countless possibilities for both peace and war. I spent 30 years trying to be something other than what I was, he finally said. Trying to prove that humanity could achieve its goals through words instead of violence. And I still believe that, Claire. I still believe that peace is possible. But sometimes the galaxy needs to be reminded that our kindness is not weakness. That we choose peace because we want to, not because we have to. He turned to look at her, and for just a moment she saw both men who lived inside him. The grandfather who wanted nothing more than to return home to his family, and the silent reaper who could make empires tremble with a whisper. Humanity's greatest strength was never our technology or our numbers, Daniel said softly. It was our ability to adapt, to become whatever we needed to be to survive. The Council understands that now. They will not forget. The shuttle jumped to hyperspace, carrying them home. Behind them, the Galactic Council began the slow process of rewriting every assumption they had ever made about the young species. From an unremarkable star, humanity had arrived. On the galactic stage, and the galaxy would never be the same again.